Well, the good news for Canada just keeps on rolling. Canada is making its move. The first major components of a $40 billion commitment to open up the Arctic. And the rest of the world is suddenly paying attention.
Ottawa has begun the process of designating Canada's first ever projects of national interest under the Building Canada Act, an 800-kilometer Arctic highway, a deepwater port in the Arctic Ocean. And together, they don't just change Canada's economy, they redraw global trade routes.
In exactly 82 days, Prime Minister Carney walks into a room in Toronto with the biggest pension funds, sovereign wealth managers, and global CEOs on the planet. He's going to tell them that Canada is open for business, and he needs something real to put on the table. This is Canada building the lookbook before the buyers walk through the door.
And today we're going to show you exactly why this is one of the most consequential moves Canada has made in a generation.
Right. So let's walk through what is actually being announced here. We're going to focus on two projects, the Mackenzie Valley Highway and the Grays Bay Road and Port.
The Mackenzie Valley Highway is 800 kilometers long, all season, running through the Northwest Territories from Wrigley to Inuvik. Right now, communities along the route depend on aircraft, barges, and winter roads. And those winter roads are shrinking every year.
Yeah, what almost everything you need, food, fuel, building materials, arrives by air or not at all, ordinary life becomes really expensive. This highway shortens the journey between Yellowknife and Inuvik by 1,200 kilometers. Travel time drops from 38 hours to roughly 23.
That is huge. For northern families, that changes everything. But we have to be honest here. There is a larger reason why Ottawa is suddenly willing to invoke national interest designation to push this through. It's what's sitting in the ground under all of that.
Yep, we're talking critical minerals. Copper, zinc, the materials that Europe, Japan, South Korea, and every advanced manufacturing economy on the planet is desperately trying to secure right now. For electricity grids, defense production, clean energy technology, all of those things.
Deposits that have been sitting there largely unreachable because there was no reliable way to get them out and no reliable way to get them to a port. Until now, that is.
Yeah. Which brings us to the second project, which is Grays Bay, a 230-kilometer road to a proposed deepwater port and airfield directly on the Arctic Ocean. Canada currently has 0 deepwater ports on the Arctic Ocean.
For a country that has spent 50 years telling the world it is an Arctic nation, well, that's a little bit embarrassing on the resume. But Grays Bay, connected to the proposed Arctic Economic and Security Corridor, would eventually link Yellowknife to an Arctic port and create the first all-season road between Nunavut and Canada's national highway system. That is a very historic move.
It is, and here's something global investors are going to pay close attention to. The Grays Bay project is being built with the Kitikikmiut Inuit Association as a partner, with significant Inuit equity ownership. The people of the North are not just bystanders here. They have a real stake in what gets built and what gets earned.
And I hope we said that right. If we said it wrong, please correct us in the comments and we'll get it right next time. Now, the Mackenzie Valley Project has similar partnerships with the Sahtu Secretariat and other Indigenous governments. And look, the large institutional investors that Carney needs in September, they care about all of this. A project with genuine Indigenous equity and community backing is far more investable than one that gets tied up in legal challenges for the next decade.
Yeah, Ottawa is learning that nation to nation isn't a phrase you just say at press conferences. It's actually a condition of doing business.
What a thought! The $40 billion is just Canada's opening move, though. The federal commitment is designed to unlock that larger private capital. He's aiming for that $1 trillion, and the highway and the ports, that's where it starts.
And here's the piece that makes all of this really come together. Let's get into September 14th and 15th in Toronto, the Canada Investment Summit.
Yeah, Ottawa is bringing the world's largest investors, sovereign wealth funds, major pension managers, global CEOs, all of them into one room. The government stated that its goal is that $1 trillion in total investment over 5 years. Public investment and incentives, they're designed to unlock much larger amounts of private and institutional capital.
Think about that, $1 trillion we're talking about here. And look, Carney can't walk into that room with good intentions and some PowerPoint presentation. He needs to show them the road, show them the port, show them that permits are moving, Indigenous partnerships are real, and the federal government has put its full legal authority behind these projects.
So the summit is being hosted with CPP Investments and the Public Sector Pension Investment Board. Their presence signals exactly who Ottawa is courting. Patient, long-horizon institutional capital that can finance infrastructure over decades.
Not quarters. This is a long-term investment strategy. We're talking highway, port, Arctic corridor, critical minerals, federal designation under a new national interest law. You package all that together, and that is a credible investment story. Canada's not just making an announcement here. It is building the catalog before the buyers even get to the room.
And right now, the timing for this catalog couldn't be better.
Yeah, let's look at Euro. They're the perfect warning card here. They spend years depending on Russian energy. And why they thought that was a good idea, well, I'll never know. But it made them realize exactly what happens when your supply chain runs through a country that can flip the switch whenever it suits them. They're not making that mistake again.
And Canada already signed its first long-term LNG deal with Germany's SCFE, up to 20 years from the Kissy Lissoms project in British Columbia, with deliveries expected in the early 2030s already. That's a big commercial commitment.
And Europe, Japan, South Korea, they're all looking for the same things. Reliable supply, stable partner, rule of law, transparent contracts. Canada checks every one of those boxes.
Japan and South Korea in particular, Dave, are watching Canada's critical mineral story very closely. Both are trying to reduce their dependence on Chinese supply chains, and Canada has the resources, the trade agreements, and the diplomatic relationships to fill that gap.
Canada has trade agreements that reach roughly 1.5 billion consumers. What we have consistently lacked is the infrastructure to actually deliver those goods.
But a Deepwater Arctic port changes all of that. It doesn't just move minerals to Europe and Asia, it creates a shorter shipping route than going through the St. Lawrence. In a world where supply chains are being redrawn because of tariffs and trade pressure, being the reliable northern route is genuinely valuable, and we have to hold on to that. Trump is not allowed to get it.
No way. But there's also a layer to this that goes even beyond commerce. The Arctic, it's getting crowded. You got Russia, China, the United States, European Arctic nations. Everyone is watching who controls what in the north.
No. And sovereignty is not a line on a map, people. It is communities that can receive fuel in winter, Coast Guard vessels that have a port to operate from, emergency response that can actually reach people.
And think about it, that same Deepwater port that ships copper to Korea can support the Canadian military resupply. The same highway that brings food to Fort Good Hope can move equipment to a northern airfield. Dual-use infrastructure is what we're talking about here. Civilian and strategic at the same time.
And look what is happening in Greenland right now. They have outside investment pressure, military interests, questions about local control, debates over Indigenous sovereignty. Well, Canada sees that, and our approach is building with Indigenous equity, building with community consent. It's going to be watched closely by every Arctic nation trying to figure out how to handle that same problem.
Yeah, Canada could be the model if it gets this right.
So all of this is happening against a backdrop that our audience understands very, very well. We're talking to you people. Canada has been far too dependent on one trading partner for far too long.
Yep, roughly 72% of Canadian merchandise exports still go to the United States. Sure, that share fell in 2025, which is real progress, but it also shows exactly how exposed Canada remains when Washington decides to use us as trade leverage.
We need to take warning of the Europe-Russia example that you said earlier. The United States is not so reliable anymore either.
No, but luckily, we're doing something about it. An Arctic port, that's another door. Pacific LNG terminals, they're another door. Atlantic ports, European agreements, Asian partnerships. Canada is finally building multiple doors at the same time.
It's very exciting.
It is.
And Carney's strategy is becoming visible to everyone. He's using federal designation, public investment, and Canadian institutional money to make projects credible enough that global private capital comes in to help us build.
And the critical question for Canada, the one that will define the next decade, is whether we do the processing here. If we dig up copper and zinc and ship the raw ore abroad and buy back expensive finished products, well, we have just built a very efficient exit ramp for Canadian wealth.
So the stronger version includes refining, processing, and manufacturing where it makes economic sense. We have to spread the benefits to workers and communities far beyond the mine itself.
Now let's be clear about where all this stands. The Mackenzie Valley Highway doesn't get a final construction decision before 2028 at the earliest. There's environmental assessments, treaty obligations, permits, funding. All of it still has to be worked through properly. Sure, speed matters, but so do the rights and relationships that cannot be treated as just inconvenient paperwork.
So the real test is September, when Prime Minister Carney walks into that investment summit with his package. The highway, the Arctic port, the LNG deal already signed, the Indigenous partnerships. Does the world write the checks?
And when those checks arrive, does Canada make sure that the value stays here in this country?
That is the question. So here's what we want to hear from you.
In September, when Canada makes its pitch to the world's biggest investors, does Carney close the deal? Or does the summit produce another round of applause with nothing in the ground by 2030?
Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I can't wait to hear what you think.
And if you want to understand how Canada's Arctic strategy connects with what's happening with NATO, critical minerals, and the global resource race, check out our videos below.
And make sure to subscribe, hype, and share with a friend because you know this is the only way we can get more people seeing our point of view.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.